It must drive you crazy to watch this revisionist history, right? I mean, Nikki Haley and Pompeo and God knows who else criticizing Biden, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's angering. Whether it's COVID or whether it's Afghanistan, this happens. It's kind of how it goes with many of these people. And yeah, to have Pompeo out there criticizing, says the guy who cut this deal to begin with, and there's the pictures to prove it, and who got us, who played a role in getting us to where we are today.
So, Olivia, this morning's news is the Taliban is saying they will no longer allow Afghans to go to the Kabul airport for evacuation. But explain to people who don't understand this visa program what the Trump administration, Stephen Miller and others did, because a lot of people don't understand what that is. But this is exactly what they intended, isn't it?
Yeah, so this program, I mean, the SIVs, and also, I talk about the P2 pipeline and the refugee pipeline because that affects Iraqis too, who also were on the ground serving with us. This is a program that's specifically for people who really were on the ground, stood by us as U.S. allies, who were our lifelines for those of us who have been overseas, who've been to Iraq and Afghanistan, who are either translators, interpreters. In many cases, I mean, there are many situations that you hear of where they've saved someone's life.
Yeah.
By leading around, and they risk their own lives, right? And they're put in grave danger because once you're working with the United States, I mean, the Taliban, especially in this situation, I see them as traitors to them, right? And so it is, I think, incumbent upon us to protect this population. And these were the discussions actually that happened during the Trump administration, whether it was in working groups at a senior staff level, talking about the refugee process in SIVs and P2s, or in cabinet level meetings where we would talk about the refugee ceiling. And, it's widely known that during the Trump administration, that was the lowest number of a refugee cap set in the history of the program.
Yeah.
Took place under the Trump administration. And Stephen Miller was a big proponent of that.
Yeah, I love when they try to say, "Oh, she doesn't know, she wasn't there," and then like, "Oh, there's a picture. There's Olivia right next to Mike Pence in that meeting." Okay, you tweeted. You're like, oh yeah, there it is. You said there were cabinet meetings about this during the Trump administration where Stephen Miller would peddle his racist hysteria about Iraq and Afghanistan. He and his enablers across government would undermine anyone who worked on solving the SIV issue by devastating the system at DHS and state. You said, I tracked this issue personally in my role during my White House tenure. Pence was fully aware of the problem. We got nowhere on it because Trump and Stephen Miller had watchdogs in place at DOJ, DHS, state, and security agencies that made an already cumbersome SIV process even more challenging. I have to say, Biden appears to be kind of doing miracles given all of this, given the deal that Trump made with the Taliban and this whole process that you talk about. The fact that I don't even know, where are we at, Jody? Do we know the last number? I know just in the last 24 hours.
Around 50,000 since this
started.
I mean,
58,700 was the number this morning.
Wow, Olivia, nearly 60,000 people we've evacuated already. I mean, and yeah, so what's your take on where we are now in the media coverage of all this?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no doubt that there is so much legacy from the Trump administration that has impacted this moment, right? And so Biden comes into office, he has dealt a really bad hand. And especially when it comes to these SIVs, when they discover that the program has basically been gutted, right? That we're not under-resourced and no one's really being processed, and they hadn't been processed in really 4 years into the Trump administration. They were targeted. And so, watching what's happening, I have to say, I mean, it's heroic efforts on behalf of the military and everyone coming together to evacuate thousands of people in this manner. And I think, yes, it's been hard to watch the events unfold in Afghanistan. It's been heartbreaking and devastating to watch the way this withdrawal had sort of developed. But we knew it was going to be hard. Yeah. We always knew it would be hard. And we knew that the potential for chaos was likely to be the case. But I have to say, I think that history will likely judge Biden on how that chaos, now that we're in it, what happened in the chaos and how he managed it. And it's pretty incredible to say that thousands of people have been evacuated in the matter of a week. And so I think, we got to give credit where credit is due. Yeah. And I am grateful for slap in the face to the Afghan security forces and to the Afghan government the second that they started going the route of cutting a deal with the Taliban. That is really, as a national security person, that's kind of how I've seen it, because I don't know what message are you sending to them by undermining completely everything that we've been doing for the past 20 years by doing that.
Yeah.
And so here we are, and now we're kind of trying to figure out how we navigate it.
Well, you must be heartened by the polling showing like 81% of Americans think we should help the Afghans, and welcome them here. Who was it? Somebody where was this? Oh, Vets Group wrote, failing to meet our obligations to these Afghans would not only be a national security risk, it would also condemn veterans and survivors of the conflict in Afghanistan to a lifetime of moral injury. And you said absolutely. Those in the GOP and right-wing pundits who are out there making anti-refugee remarks and statements against aiding our Afghan allies need to hear these veterans organizations loud and clear as well. Boy, they love the vets until they don't, right? Yep. Until they don't want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah. Just like they back the blue until it's no longer convenient. And you have, our U.S. Capitol Police telling the truth about what they witnessed on January 6th. Yep. I mean, it's the same thing. You support the groups until you turn their back on them because it's no longer convenient with your narrative and your fundraising as well.
Well, looking inside when you were there again, you tweeted the system wouldn't budge regardless of how much this was argued about in National Security Council meetings. The Pentagon weighed in and said we needed to get these allies through the process. Mattis and others sent memos. We all knew the urgency. The resources, though, had been depleted. The fear of people across the Trump administration to counter these enablers was palpable. There were numerous behind closed-door meetings and held strategizing how to navigate this issue. You say the Trump administration had 4 years while putting this plan in place to evacuate these Afghan allies who were in the lifelines for many of us who spent time in Afghanistan. They've been waiting a long time. The process slowed to a trickle for reviews and or other priorities, then came to a halt. As he just said this morning, the soundbite we just played, Olivia, exactly what you've been saying, right? And you said to people like J.D. Vance and others who are making blanket statements, pushing narratives of convenience on Afghanistan, especially on SIV and allies issue, please stop. Your comments are uninformed and also hurtful. We see right through you. I mean, did they not think people like you were there? You were just there, right? Thank God for people like you speaking out, going, I was just there. This is how this happened.
No, I lived it. And there would be meetings where you knew who the Stephen Miller allies were that would show up to the meetings and make their comments about what do we want, a bunch of terrorists running around our country. And that's just so baseless, especially for someone like me, who comes from the national security world, who knows the stats on this, who knows that these people are vetted. And by the way, I every time I would hear that narrative, I would be like, these people put their lives at risk on the ground in country with us. These are not, they're screened and they're vetted. These are not terrorists and they're not coming here. These people feel like at the end, if you talk to military people, if you talk to intel officers, NGOs, media, these people become like family to you because you really get to know them. And it was hurtful to hear kind of these comments made in meetings. And there were certainly those of us who, honestly, we would have closed door conversations and and strategize on how we were going to counter these forces in an upcoming meeting when their major decision was going to be made.
Yeah.
And I certainly saw this. I saw it in a cabinet meeting where I had someone come in. I was supposed to deliver the vice president's position. I went there, and then a person who outranked me delivered the opposite talking points that the vice president directly told me to deliver during that meeting.
Wow.
And
Olivia,
I can't tell you how angering that was when I walked out of that room.
Yeah. Olivia, were you raised Republican like I was, as I talked to you in the shadow of the Goldwater Miller poster?
I was, for the most part. I mean, I come from a conservative family. I'm Mexican American. My mom is very, very Catholic, and I'm actually part Jewish as well. So I guess
12 years hard time
representative. Yeah.
Catholic school. I gotcha. Well, no, I just, but it's interesting because I sort of, I look at the sort of what's become of, I guess, your party or my dad's party, whoever. I even George Bush, who I think is a war criminal. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, got us into Afghanistan. Let's not talk about it. But my point is, when he talked about compassionate conservatives and he was for immigration reform, I mean, even then, it was not this level of crazy we're in. You've seen right-wingers literally cheering for the Taliban. Mm-hmm. Like some of these right-wing Republicans, anything to try to, bash Joe Biden, they're rooting for the enemy. I mean, this fight against COVID, we're fighting them. the enemy is within. I mean, it's isn't that sort of a sad state of the Republican Party? We're fighting COVID and them on the home front, and they're rooting for the Taliban. It appears overseas.
Yeah, it's pure insanity. And I just don't know. The GOP that I knew back in the day is dead right now. I don't see any really similar. I mean, there's few and far between people that still stand for it, and I think it's so fascinating right now to watch the divide surfacing within the Republican Party, especially on the Afghan refugees and the SIVs issue. Right? You have some people saying we've got to. They're U.S. allies, get them over here, and then there's a split, and it's very fascinating to watch where this narrative is going to go now. But I don't identify with any of what is happening in the party, and I'm a moderate conservative, but I don't really, I can't call myself a Republican anymore when I am sick to my stomach at who these people are.
Oh, thank God.
What they've become over the past few years.
Thank God. Such good news for our friendship. Okay. But you addressed Greg Abbott on Twitter. You said you've continuously challenged leaders across Texas, making it harder for communities to fight this COVID pandemic. You caved to Trump, pandered to his base still today. I wish you a speedy recovery from COVID. But even more so, I wish you would change of moral compass and conscience. And I hear it in your voice. I don't feel hope for this version of the Republican Party. Do you?
No, and I'm extremely angry with Abbott. I grew up in Texas. I have seen firsthand what he's done to state and local leaders that are trying to manage how to protect their local populations and school children. I mean, I cannot wrap my head around the fact that you are purposely going out of your way to make it incredibly challenging for people to fight this pandemic just because it's, a platform. And you're doubling down on something that you started doing under Trump, and you're so scared of this base that you will go along with the narrative that puts your people at risk, that kills people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's appalling.
Yeah.
It's shameless, and it's irresponsible as well.
Somebody said that we just want people not to die of COVID and to be able to vote. And to Republicans, that's a radical idea. For some reason, those are, radical ideas. But it is a sad state. But we're always so grateful when you take time to talk to us. Thanks so much, Olivia.